Okay, you'll often hear the phrase do not repeat yourself when it comes to coding, and its acronym, of course, is DRY, dry. And one of the features that we can use inside C Sharp to help us with this is the concept of inheritance. And if we take a look at our Solution Explorer inside our controllers, then we've got some repetition between the two controllers that we currently have. And in both controllers, we've specified the API controller attribute. We've also specified routing. And this controller in square brackets placeholder, or these two lines in fact, are exactly the same as what we have in our users controller. And both of these also derive from the controller base as well. Now what we could do to avoid repeating ourselves in this way is to create a base API controller that has these attributes and derives from the controller base. And then instead of deriving from the controller base in these controllers and any new controllers that we create, we can derive from our new base API controllers or controller that has these attributes and is already deriving from this class. And it's just a small example of how we can avoid repetition inside our code. So inside the controllers folder, I'm going to add a new file, and I'm using the C# dev kit here, so I'm inside the Solution Explorer. And when I do create a new file, I get a list of different options or C# objects I can create. So I'm going to press return to say I want to create a new class and say base API controller. And press return. And inside here, as mentioned, we're going to use this and say API controller as an attribute. We'll give it a root and specify API / and in the square brackets we'll use controller, and then from this one we're going to derive from controller base. And that's all we need for our base API controller. What this means is that I can update our existing controllers. I'll keep this one in place even though we're not really using it. But we can remove now the attributes from this one. And instead of deriving from controller base, we can derive from our base API controller. And we can also do the same inside our users controller as well. We can remove the two attributes at the top, and we can derive once again from the base API controller. Now that's not a huge change, and we've probably saved ourselves 10 to 20 characters there, but these do add up. So where there's an opportunity to avoid repetition, then for sure we're going to take a look at it. So the important thing to do now is, after we've made a change, is check our terminal to see if it's reloaded correctly, and in this case I've actually got my application stopped, so I'm just going to execute .NET Watch, and then we're going to go ahead and test our application is still working just as it was before, because we haven't changed anything really. And the tool that we're going to use to test our application is Postman. And we've used this before, and we've got a request still hanging about here, so I can click send, and I should still get my users back. Don't worry about the password and salt being empty strings. That's fine for the time being, and we will be updating this, of course, but it would be irritating or time consuming to keep typing out these requests manually every single time. So what I do have is a Postman collection that you can use, which has these requests pre-written, and some other things that I'll talk about as and when we use them. So if you do open up this student assets folder, please go back to lesson 3. If you have not downloaded this yet, to go ahead and actually download this student assets folder, because it does contain some resources that we are going to use. Now we're effectively just going to import this Postman collection into Postman. And if we take a look at the options here, and if we go to Postman and File, and imports, then we can drop a collection into there. So I'm just going to drag in that Postman collection into Postman, and then we've got a collection of requests. We can remove the collection we created now. Let's just delete that to clean things up inside here. And for each section we've got a bunch of requests to test our API, and I'll just highlight a couple of features of Postman as well. So let's just test our original request. This one will now fail because it's using 5001 /weather forecast, but because we're deriving from our API or base API controller, this one will no longer work and we'll get a 404 not found. But if we change it to its correct URL of API weather forecast, then this one will work. If we take a look at get users and we click send, then we get our list of users. And can we get an individual user? We'll click send, and sure, yes we can. Now, one of the benefits of using Postman, if I take a look at the register user that we'll be using soon, then we can give this some variables. Where is our application starting from? And if I hover over the URL here, then I can see its current value is set to HTTPS localhost 5001, and this is coming from the collection variables. So if we take a look at the collection and we click on dating app itself, then we have a bunch of variables inside here that we'll be using on occasions inside our application. So if your application has started on a different port number, or you're not using HTTPS, then do please come into the collection variables and update it to reflect what your application is listening on. And then when we do come to things like registering a user where I've used that value, then you just need to change this in one place, and then all of these requests will be using that as the URL. So we'll be using Postman frequently throughout this course, so do please get hold of this collection. I will be coming back to use these requests inside here, as this is a bit of a time saver just to make sure that the code that we're implementing is working correctly. So please make sure you have this available as well. And what we'll take a look at next is creating a new controller to register a new user to our application.